Ole Miss is set to have the most explosive offense in school history, but you don't have to take my word for it.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in America, and that's because of fans like you tuning into content like this, and we're very appreciative of that. On today's show, we're taking an early look at the 2026 season and which games you need to pay attention to. Even though this game has been somewhat overshadowed, Ole Miss heading to Texas has all the makings of a game of the year type matchup. We'll break down why that is so big in that segment. And next, if you've been waiting for the prototypical big-bodied wide receiver Ole Miss fans have come to expect, looks like that wait might be over. We'll tell you who, we'll tell you where, all of that stuff. But first, we start with a bold reality. The first year after Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss is positioned to field the best offense in school history, featuring the best quarterback, the best running back, and the best kicker in college football. And no, that's not just me hyping it up. There's other opinions there. We will tell you all about that stuff. We'll explain why the numbers, the roster, and the trajectory all support it. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is your team every day. So I've been telling anybody that would listen on this podcast over the last couple of weeks that Trinidad, when he gets his waiver through, Ole Miss will have the top quarterback in the country, the top running back in the country, and the top kicker in the country. And everybody liked to roll their eyes at Steve. It's like, hey, he's pumping sunshine again. That is what he does. And it feels like people would realize after the last 2 or 3 years that sometimes I'm just right. And on this one, I am absolutely right. Chris Lowe put out his way too early top 20, or his way too early All-American picks. And there's a couple of observations that you can take away from this. First of all, Ole Miss has 3 players as first-team All-Americans in Trinidad Chambliss at quarterback, at Kewan Lacy at running back, and at Lucas Carneiro at kicker. Just like I said, the best quarterback, the best running back, the best kicker in college football, which means this offense has a chance to be spectacular this season. Remember, in the playoffs, Miami had not given up like over 20 points or 22 points or something like that the whole season. Almost put 27 on that, and that was with a slow start. The offense of Kewan Lacy and Trinidad Chambliss and the weapon that is Lucas Carneiro, because if you have the top quarterback and the top running back and you get to the 40-yard line, a field goal is likely going to get made. This is an offense that thrives on points, does very well, and now they're not going to play the slot machine so much, and they're going to take the points when they're available because the goal of this whole thing is to win games. And I know everybody talked about the #1 transfer portal class at LSU, but the fact of the matter is, over the last month of the season, Lane Kiffin openly recruited Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacy to LSU. The fact that he didn't land either one of them is kudos to the Grove Collective and the Ole Miss football program, because if Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacy both went into the transfer portal, they would be the #1 and the #2 player in the entire portal. Ole Miss landing that doesn't get credit for their transfer portal class, but that was an absolutely massive signing, just like Will Eccles, just like Suntaran Perkins. So this Ole Miss team is going to be much more resembling of the 2024 team than the 2025 team. And the 2025 team, 13-2, national semifinals, really good team. But this year's team, talent-wise, have all the making to where the class of the SEC. And there's really only one team that can really compete with it. You're going to have a couple of teams with questions that could rise up if everything goes right. But there are two teams that are judged by everybody as being supremely talented teams, and that is Ole Miss and Texas. And when you look at this roster, you can see that Ole Miss has Trinidad Chambliss, Kewan Lacy, Lucas Carneiro for their 3 first-team All-Americans. Texas has Ryan Niblett, punt returner. He took one back against Mississippi State in that game. Rasheem Biles took one linebacker. Colin Simmons, excellent edge rusher. And then they have an offensive player in Trevor Gooseby, who's an offensive tackle. These are 2 teams that have 7 of the total roster spots. 7 of the 24 is Ole Miss and Texas in this matchup. Chris Lowe, listen, everybody respects Chris Lowe and what he has done as a reporter, and he respects the access that happens to everybody in college football. He worked at ESPN forever. Now he's at On3. The fact that he's putting Ole Miss in that position is at least very interesting. And when you look at the totality of the transfer portal class that Ole Miss has signed on top of what they retained, this team has a chance to be really, really good. And that's interesting. We're over the next couple of days on the all access tier of that channel on LockedOnOleMiss.supercast.com. We have Coach Corey Burton breaking down the offensive transfer portal signees, and we have Mike Huseman breaking down the defensive transfer portal signings. So you can check that out as well in the all access tier. The fact of the matter is, though, this offense has a chance to be something that we have never seen at Ole Miss. Through all of the great offenses that Ole Miss has had in the last 15 or so years, take all of those, this one has a chance to be special. And when you look at it, if you want to see that, if you want to understand that, last season, Trinidad Chambliss led an offense that scored over 30 points in 7 straight games. And in the 8th game, they didn't hit 30 points, but they hit 27, and that was a season high against the opponent they were playing. The offense last season was explosive, and the governor of that offense is coming back. What Joe Judge did with Trinidad Chambliss, how they retrofitted an Austin Simmons offense for Trinidad Chambliss, the growth of Kewan Lacy. You look at the receivers that they brought in the transfer portal, like Darryl Gill and Johntay Cook, and we're going to talk about Horatio Fields in the next segment. But when you look at what they brought in, that matches a Deuce Alexander, that matches a Caleb Cunningham, hell, even a Jase Mathews will be worth paying attention to. I'm totally impressed for what this offense could be in 2026. I'm ready to see it. When Ole Miss takes the field against Louisville and in Nashville to start the season, when Ole Miss takes on other matchups September 19th against LSU, everybody's pointing to that one, obviously, in between against Charlotte. I'm excited to see exactly what this offense looks like. And we'll talk about some of those games in the third segment today, okay? We're going to talk about the LSU game. We're going to talk about the Texas game. We're going to talk about the Georgia game. We're going to talk about the game against lifelong rivals, the Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, you just simply can't keep the record books intact with that game. There's craziness, wildness that can happen. All of that we're going to talk about in the third segment, because this is an Ole Miss team. Once the final word comes back for Trinidad Chambliss in the waiver, this is a national championship team that competing for it. They are literally going to compete for the number 1 next to their name. They have the chance to be this year's Indiana. When you look at what they can be offensively and the talent that they accumulated to improve the defense, that is a major thing. And they have the best special teams in all of college football to start with. I am really excited about which direction it is going to go. So we'll see all about that. Anyway, big-bodied wide receivers have become a trademark of Ole Miss, and they've been they may have found their guy in the transfer portal at the very end. We'll break that all down right after this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. The WNBA has released its 2026 schedule featuring a 44-game regular season beginning on Friday, May 8th. The league's historic 30th season includes expansion teams Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, with opening weekend highlights such as Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hosting Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings, and a rematch of the 2025 finals between the Aces and the Mercury. In college hoops, South Carolina handed Vanderbilt its first loss of the season with a dominant 103-74 win. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Hey, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcatcher you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep the lights on and keeps all of this free. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more. All for just $5 per month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemist.supercast.com or check out the link down in the show notes to learn more. So Ole Miss may have found at the very end of the transfer portal window their big-bodied wide receiver. Traditionally, that is what Ole Miss has been known for. And now Ole Miss is being recruited at wide receivers. Part of that is Dante Moncrief having a role in recruiting that position, and he was like the first big body wide receiver that started this whole thing 15, 16 years ago. So that's pretty cool to see. But whenever you look at Deshaun Stribling, when you look at Trey Harris, when you look at the big-bodied number ones, the Jonathan Mingos, guys that have played in the league, Ole Miss has developed a reputation of handling that position very well, traditionally. And it looked like this year, the biggest name wide receiver they were going to pull in as far as a big wide receiver was Darryl Gill. And let's just be honest about Darryl Gill. He's like 6'3", 180. He can run like the wind, but he's more comparable to a Harrison Wallace III than a Trey Harris or a Deshaun Stribling. So who was going to be the big-bodied wide receiver? You saw people talking about how, they're going to move Caleb Odom outside, which I don't think they are. I don't think Caleb Odom is going to move outside the tight end position. But Ole Miss was able to find a big-bodied wide receiver at the very end of this transfer portal after, ironically, Caden Lee ended up going up to Missouri. And with Ole Miss having the late start time, Ole Miss was able to get in on Horatio Fields. Horatio Fields this year was at Auburn for 4 games. He had 12 catches at Auburn for about 100 and something yards. His biggest game was against Ball State. This offense was anemic. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. And he spent the 2024 season at Wake Forest with Deuce Alexander. The irony of this whole situation is he has a relationship to both Deuces on the roster in 2 different places. He has the Deuce Alexander from Wake Forest. He has the Deuce Knight from Auburn. But they put a post on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it, Deuce Alexander saying, hey, run it back. And there was a picture of him and Horatio Fields as somebody you need to pay attention to. In 2024 at Wake Forest, he had 39 catches, 463 yards, and 4 touchdowns on a team that wasn't very good. I mean, you saw what Ole Miss did to that team on the CW right after Dawson's Creek. They just dominated that game from start to finish. But he is a bigger-bodied wide receiver for John David Baker. And this offensive room where you need matchups, you need to do the the free release stuff, the quick stuff on the game. And he was able to catch balls that were thrown all around. He has an excellent catch radius. He's extremely physical, and he's hard to bump off of the ball. Now, what I haven't seen of this player, I have not seen a wide receiver that has elite speed like a Deshaun Stribling or Jonathan Mingo, those guys that can really run. That doesn't mean that this is going to be a problem. I just haven't noticed it because he had the broken foot against Auburn. So you couldn't really tell what the speed looked like for the Tigers. And the stuff that I saw for Wake Forest was all the deep mesh stuff that Wake Forest did. So there was a lot of slants, a lot of late throws. The timing was just weird in that Wake Forest offense. So all you could see was contested catches down the field. And a lot of that has to do with the offense as it was designed. Horatio Fields has every capability to be a starting wide receiver for this Ole Miss team. Now, the question's going to be, and this has been the question the whole time, when Horatio Fields comes in, obviously he is going to be good, but is he going to be good enough to keep Caleb Cunningham off the field? Is Horatio Fields the backup wide receiver and Caleb Cunningham being that guy on the outside? Because he does have the speed to break away. He does have the ability to look honestly like A.J. Brown playing out on the outside. Horatio Fields raises the floor of the wide receiver room at Ole Miss. It was already really good when you add Johntay Cook and Deuce Alexander and those guys there with Darryl Gill, and that the wide receiver room is very good, very talented, especially with what they have at tight end. What you are curious about is the bigger wide receiver on the outside. Who is going to win that position? Is it going to be even potentially Trayvon Ray, who is somebody that kind of disappeared into the cornerback room at the end of last season? Now he's going to probably meet with the coaches and end up back on the offensive side of the football. The wide receiver room is deep, like it always is. It's amazing that this season we thought the transfer portal was going to be different because Mr. signing 8 wide receivers in a transfer portal class is gone. Well, Ole Miss still signed a bunch of wide receivers, even without him. So maybe it was a Grove Collective thing. Maybe it was LaDamian Washington. Maybe it was John David Baker. But Ole Miss rebuilt the wide receiver room and will have, and I'm not joking about this, a 5-star at slot, a 5-star in Caleb Cunningham, and a 5-star in Jase Mathews on the roster. The room at wide receiver has 3 5-stars, and that's even with Winston Watkins, who was a 5-star on Rivals, transferring to LSU. The point of this is, we talked last segment about how Ole Miss has the top quarterback in college football if Trinidad comes back, the top running back in college football, and the top kicker in college football. We also have a pass-catching room that can maximize that performance for your offense. Listen, when you see everything line up what they're going to do, I think there's going to be a ton of versatility. And it's also important to realize last season offense was retrofitted. It was a retrofitted Austin Simmons offense for Trinidad Chambliss. John David Baker has 8 months to put together an offense that maximizes his strengths. You saw over the course of this season what Trinidad did well. Now you can add to it. You can get in the lab and figure some stuff out that you figure, hey, he can do some things on the edges. We might play on the edges to make it work because Ole Miss had some quirky stuff last year, but it might be time to look at some of the Ferris State stuff that he did that didn't necessarily have a chance to get put in 2025. Really interesting stuff, and I'm curious to see exactly how it looks. But Horatio Fields, good player. The offense is set up to be very, very good. Anyway, in our final segment, everybody's going to point to the LSU game in 2026, and for good reason, or maybe the Georgia game. But the truth is, neither is the toughest game that Ole Miss will play. We'll explain which one that is coming up next. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every single transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That is where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can keep growing your savings. I was shocked when Rocket Money showed me I was still paying for a recruiting site that I'd completely forgotten about. It is already saving me money. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see exactly where my money is going each month. And you can set budgets and goals, get personalized insights, and receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. It even consolidates your checking, savings, and loans and investments into a single dashboard so you can get a clear view of your entire financial picture. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. So one thing that's interesting whenever you look at the 2026, and we're not going to do W's and L's or anything like that on the schedule, with just kind of a preliminary look now that the roster is getting close to finalize. There's still going to be a couple of players that transfer in and out. Grad transfers can still move around from time to time. But as it sits right now, 97% of the roster is in place, and Ole Miss is going to be an unbelievably talented team. So that changes where it matters. Now, everybody's going to talk about the LSU game against Lane Kiffin and the Tigers coming to Oxford on September 19th. And yes, have game day in the Grove, the whole 9 yards. That day is going to be absolutely fantastic. But that's not the toughest game of the year. Now, granted, I'm not insulting LSU. They have a $50 million roster. They're going to be good, but that's not the toughest game of the year. Ole Miss plays Georgia at home as well. Ole Miss was a missed tackle on a 4th and 2 from winning in Athens, Georgia, and in the second half, they completely took over that Sugar Bowl against the Georgia Bulldogs. Ole Miss has a better team than Georgia last year and this year. So I think Ole Miss is going to be all right in that. That's not going to be the toughest game. The game against the lifelong rivals of the Oklahoma Sooners, that's going to be a very hard game. That's a team that made the playoffs this year. You're going to have a more healthy John Mateer. You have another year in the transfer portal. You have Brent Venables on defense. He's really good at what he does. That's going to be a very tough game because it's a road game. That's not going to be the toughest game on the schedule. All three of those games are going to be really hard. All three of those games are not the toughest game on the schedule. The toughest game on the schedule is a game against the Texas Longhorns, a game at Texas, a game in Austin, a game with a Manning at quarterback, a game with weapons at wide receiver and at running back. They have assembled a group of players that are going to be very good, and they're going to either be the favorite for the SEC or the second-ranked team going into SEC Media Days. Honestly, Ole Miss should probably be on that list as well. But it is setting up a game of the year. Now, Ole Miss is at a disadvantage because the game is at Darrell Royal Stadium, and Ole Miss is going to be the visiting team. But that game is the Heisman game. That game is the most important game of the season, potentially going in to looking at these All-American teams. What that game is what we all have been talking about the other three games being. But yet Texas does not get the love on the Ole Miss schedule that the other three games get. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that you're just lifelong rivals against the Oklahoma Sooners, and you can throw out the records whenever those two teams meet up in historic Owen Field or wherever they're playing. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And LSU obviously takes the oxygen out of the room because of the Lane Kiffin situation. And Georgia is because Kirby is a gold standard of college football and all of that. But none of those 3 games are the toughest game that Ole Miss will face. The game at Texas will be absolutely everything for this season for Ole Miss. Now, the Texas game is going to mean less if you drop that Georgia game or you drop that LSU game. Georgia and Oklahoma back-to-back again, just like it was a year ago. Difference is game at Norman, but this time it's a game in Oxford. And Kirby Smart is not beating Ole Miss in any place but Athens, Georgia. So I feel pretty good about that. Ole Miss has a winning record with 3 different head coaches against Kirby Smart. I feel fine about that. Big game Lane coming out against Ole Miss. Yes, that's absolutely a possibility as well. Feel pretty good about that. Oklahoma, I don't feel great about that because it's a road game and because of how talented they are. I don't feel great about the Texas game because it's a road game and how talented they are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the game won't be absolutely epic. It'll be interesting to see. 100,000 in Texas, 85,000 in Oklahoma. And you got the 2 games in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. It's going to be fantastic. Ole Miss plays at the Swamp. They play a couple of games in Nashville next season. They play Missouri at home. The 9-game SEC schedule is a home run for fans. Absolutely a home run. But it is going to be much more difficult than it was last year. I'm glad Ole Miss made their playoff run and got that out of the way so you can build up to the next one. And Pete Golding, he's only ever coached playoff level games. The next game that he plays is not as important as the 3 that it's already had. And unless he gets to the playoffs again or the SEC title game, there's not a game that he'll play that's more important than the 3 that he's already had. So it's going to be interesting. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk transfer portal all week long. Make sure you subscribe and follow so you can get all the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels, so check that out as well. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Ole Miss, Locked On Ole Miss ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com and join the club. You can hit our all-access tier where Corey Burton, Mike Huseman, and Dalen Flowers participate on that and add extra videos. The after the show video for this will be tomorrow morning as well in the all-access tier. For those of you on video, we're going to send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you check out a second listen, whether it's Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC. Hotty toddy, everybody. Let's get excited. This transfer portal is almost closed. So take care, everybody.